and welcome to the Executive Room podcast, where we delve deep into the minds of remarkable executives who have shaped the business world with their ideas and actions. I'm your host, Kimberly Afonso, CEO and founder of the KA Consulting Group. Today, we have a great conversation with David Esposito, a highly accomplished healthcare executive whose journey through the business world is nothing short of extraordinary. David's career is a testament to his exceptional leadership and innovative vision. He successfully built and scaled multiple companies, each culminating in strategic buyouts. His current role as CEO of ONL Therapeutics is dedicated to developing therapeutics that use FAST inhibition to protect the vision of patients with retinal diseases. It's a mission that underscores his commitment to making a real difference in the lives of countless individuals. We're honored to have him on the show, and let's get started. So, thank you again, David, for being here with us today. Your journey from a combat veteran to a business executive and CEO is truly inspiring. Can you share some of the pivotal moments or experiences that have shaped your transition from military service to the corporate world over the past few decades?
Sure, Kimberly, and thanks a lot for the invite. Excited to talk to you today, and I appreciate you inviting me on the show. I think maybe we should modify that bio a bit. I've had a couple successful exits. I've also, built and scaled a few companies that didn't make it. When you get into the early stage, sometimes you skin your knees a little bit making it go. But no, appreciate you having me. In terms of military service to business transition, there's a whole lot of parallels. I think if I look back on my military service and career and where I've been um, in more of a business framework, I think the ability to address change quickly is a key attribute that straddles both military and business. I mean, both disciplines, you've got to think about what the plan is, what the mission is, and ultimately what you want to accomplish. But at the end of the day, whether it's when the bullets start flying or a product launch starts happening, you've got to be able to adapt to the data points you have in front of you and move the team or the unit forward towards the objective. And I think those kind of characteristics of the discipline of building a plan, but then being able to really adapt and change is is a hallmark, at least of kind of my journey in both the military and my experience in the first Gulf War, and then ultimately where I am today in building a couple different companies. Comes down to a whole lot of that I think we could probably talk for a while about those specific examples, but I think that's a big aspect of what I think is a good learning for the military into corporate America.
That makes a lot of sense. And your career in life sciences has spanned over 30 years. We saw that you've worked with Merck to leading diagnostic businesses, and now your current role as CEO. Can you share some of the insights or turning points that have defined your journey over the years in the industry?
Sure. Well, I think, in life sciences itself, I found it for 30 plus years. Yeah, I can't believe it's that long, but it is. That it's very purposeful work. When you talk about innovation to really try to alleviate the suffering of patients from various diseases, that's super purposeful work. So I think that kind of attraction is what kept me engaged in life sciences. I think I made a pretty significant shift in my career when I left a large pharmaceutical company after about over 15 years, and then got into more early stage companies. I think, for me in that journey, it was always about the purpose to really bring innovation to the marketplace to help in the life science space. I think it's sometimes I'm not unique in this. Sometimes you reach a point with large companies, your efforts maybe are put more towards making the machine work more efficiently as opposed to the innovation. And I saw, a big shift where innovation was happening on the outside from academic environments, all of that, and large companies were acquiring those. seemed like an exciting place for me to be. So that was a big driver of it. But at the end of the day, it's still purposeful work to be a part of kind of the life science field. It's super thrilling.
And what are some of the difference in leadership dynamics you've encountered, and how did you deal with them, relating to, as you said, you were in that strong corporate career on that track for many, many years, and then you moved to building and scaling high growth companies?
Yeah. Well, I think the practical reality and difference is that in early stage companies, especially in life sciences where I've been, is that you're constantly thinking about the runway, the cash runway to keep the business going is incredibly important, and it also gets very personal when you're scaling a team. Whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 people, you realize that runway is not just a corporate imperative. You're looking into the eyes of people who are coming on board, joining a venture that they've got mortgages, car payments like everybody else. And that practical reality gets super personal at an early stage. I didn't necessarily feel that in the big companies that I was with. I think that's a key one. And then I think the second one is that the decisions are much more direct and owned. When you have a small team and you think about things like, is the product ready for the market? Is it ready to launch? Um, do you see performance of the product? So I've been in both diagnostics and therapeutics. Do you see the performance that's marketable? Those are big decisions, and I think even in the diagnostics world, um, not every diagnostic is not perfect. So, how do you deal with false positives or false negatives in those diagnostics, knowing that the test is never perfect? Those decisions you stomach on your own, and I think those are some of the big. You have a small team, but it's not like a huge company where you probably have a lot of matrix decision making that gets you in a spot as opposed to in a small company. You feel the ownership a little bit more.
That makes a lot of sense, and it seems like it makes it much more personal, that touch point, with your other team members, employees, and the products. So now
So,
moving to the inescapable topic of this year, your company is involved in harnessing the potential of AI and machine learning in biotechnology. We've been hearing a ton about this year. How do you see these technologies transforming the patient identification process and overall patient care in the future?
yeah, I think that's an important topic. You're right. It's been around for a little while. It seems like it's really stepped on the gas this year or so with regards to AI. I mean, I think for us now in the therapeutic space, it really is supportive in terms of biomarker identification, and then ultimately those biomarkers that identify the right patients for the right therapeutic target that you're in. I mean, we've seen advances in that. We're using an imaging technology out of the United Kingdom, a company called Novi, that has this imaging technology that measures the stress level in retinal cells. So, quite literally, you can measure and assess the patients you really want to treat to move them in. And then ultimately, the backside of that data can continue to be optimized to identify the right patients that responded to therapy. So it's moving forward. It's like a lot of these things that, especially in therapeutic life sciences, the sooner you can identify a signal or the lack of a signal, the better it is for everybody. And we're seeing kind of a lot of these machine learning companies helping us accelerate development, and that's pretty huge.
And AI's integration into healthcare often faces challenges related to data and privacy. How do you navigate these challenges while still leveraging the AI to the benefit of the patients and the drug developments? Do you have any insight there?
that's, that's a good question, and I think it's always I call it a source of healthy tension. There's risk, on exposure of health information, all of those things we deal with even on a day-to-day basis with credit cards and all that stuff. So that kind of ability to understand that risk, but then also know that the speed of innovation comes down to a lot of open source information to be able to adapt and overcome. And I think that's a really good, healthy debate in that balance of locking stuff down, not sharing information. Where's the risk in your information getting out, and then balancing the pace of innovation. I can think about it in eye disease, but you see it in cancer. There's a lot of online databases that people are just contributing their information to support the discovery. It's not uncommon in the eye diseases that we treat that patients who enter our clinical trial really say, I know it's not going to help me, but it may help my kids or my grandkids. So have at it with all the information you need, share it with whoever. So, I think there's a little bit of that acknowledgement that nothing is ever super secure. I mean, that's the practical reality of it, but how can we safeguard as best we can, but not slow down the pace of innovation? And I just it's hats off to those patient 1, 2, 3 that are in these trials because they're doing it for those kind of reasons for generations to come.
Wow, that's really inspiring for them as well to be able to do that, like you said, not just for themselves, but potentially for the generations to come. And one of the things that we read about you that we thought was also very inspiring is that you received a bronze star for combat operations during the Gulf War. So, as you've had these leadership positions in the military and the business world, what are the leadership principles that you believe have been universal and have really guided you over the past few decades?
Well, thanks, Kimberly, for that note. I think a few that come to top of mind when I think about that is I was an infantry officer, so first and foremost, leadership's about leading from the front. It's not about sitting behind a desk or having a whole host of folks in front of you. Leadership, effective leadership, is standing in the front and moving the team forward. And so, that's an important attribute that I learned in the military, and I certainly learned in business situations that leader needs to stand and deliver and be there and call the team to do exactly what they're doing. So and that principle of leading from the front is a big one. I think the second part is what I think many of us aspire to do is to see yourself serving a cause or a purpose bigger than yourself. It's not about me, or in the business world, it's not about titles and rank and pay scale. It's about serving the purpose that's bigger than one individual. And so those were hallmarks of service in the military, and I feel like they've been hallmarks of the teams that I've tried to build and work on. That's an important piece of it. Um, and I'd say maybe the last one too is the stuff is complicated, whether it's military operations or business operations. So everybody needs a good dose of humility to know that they don't have all the answers. They've got to build a good, diverse team around them that may have different points of view and the courage to put them on the table. It's good to stay humble through all those things because, as I said, maybe in the open, I've had a couple good runs, but I've taken a few into burning, painful bankruptcies, and it's just the journey that I'm on, and I think that's part of it.
Well, like a true entrepreneur, you've kept going. So success always comes if you keep going, which
Yeah.
you're a testament to that.
Well, it takes a little longer sometimes than you think. Everybody's clock's a little shorter.
And David, do you tend to hire veterans, or from your military experience, have you seen more benefit in hiring veterans, or do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I may be a little bit biased in that, but I think it is a good source of very strong talent that's focused on a mission, that's team oriented, that's willing to give it all they have for the good of the team. And so I think those qualities that most develop in military service make for some outstanding employees as part of a team. So I definitely do that. Um, But quite frankly, those characteristics a lot of times you see in others, whether they, were an athlete or part of a team or, struggles in upbringing, realize all those things. But certainly, as this podcast is on Veterans Day, I think certainly we definitely have a bent towards making sure we cast a wide net to see if there are any good veterans out there.
Yes, like you said, very timely as we have Veterans Day as we're recording. So, your book, Looking Back, highlights your successful endeavors and some of the failures that you mentioned today. And can you provide an example of one of the challenging moments in your journey that shaped your approach to leadership and the lessons you learned from it?
Sure, I think it's a little bit of the um, blend of that military experience I mentioned, and then that looking back was much more focused on my corporate journey. So I think it's really about running to the sound of the guns or running to the fight, running to the problem and the challenge as opposed to running away from it. And I certainly learned that in the military, but in that book, I highlight a couple examples. I mean, it was in a situation where I was part of a company, early stage company, when the leadership team just uh, came apart and the CEO left, and I needed to, as part of the board, needed to jump in and be an interim CEO, uh, get the company back in line, begin to raise funding and and do those things. The company unfortunately ended up in bankruptcy. We just couldn't pull it out, but it's the kind of thing where you see a challenge, you got to jump into the fight and see if you can sort it out. That was, I think, a learning for me in early stage world, but you learned it in military backgrounds too. Is like you're going to hit those situations where you got to make a decision. You're going to get in or going to get out. And I feel like it's back to maybe that principle I shared about leading from the front. Sometimes you got to run to the fight and you got to figure it out. And I learned it through that when it was a bit painful in terms of the personal, professional, and financial challenge. But you know what? I think I'm a little bit stronger professional after going through that. At least I hope so.
I'm sure you are. And do you have any advice for other listeners who may be interested in writing their own book? How did you find the process? And how did you come up with what you wanted to write your book about?
Yeah, I certainly encourage people when they have something in their heart to share it. Nowadays, it used to be, old school way you have to find a publisher and get a book and all that kind of stuff. Now it's nothing stopping people from making a healthy blog post on LinkedIn or things like that that could ultimately become a book. So I certainly encourage people to do that. It is a lot, I don't want to say easier, but it's more efficient now with a lot of online printed books. You can kind of move quickly. But I would say if people, have a purpose in their heart to share some learnings, it's really good. It's like anything else, though. Everybody may have that good idea. You got to put pen to paper. You got to sit in front of a computer, and that's going to take time away from other things, and you got to think about that. But I encourage people to do it. We probably, I think, many of us are budding authors at some point.
And did you write your book yourself, David, or did you record yourself? How did you go about it? What was your process?
Yeah, I no, I wrote it myself. I've written a couple books, and so some of them started out as blog posts that I would put, whether it's on LinkedIn or a website that I have that just got in the habit of really journaling thoughts about leadership and things like that. So that got me going. But then it is, um, for me, it's I'm not too good kind of late in the afternoon, late evenings for writing. So a good cup of coffee, segmenting some time in the early morning hours before the world starts turning a little bit is when I found my best productive writing times. And then it's like anything else. You got to put a little habit together, whether it's exercise or doing. You just got to put it on the calendar and do it. And that's what I find. It's kind of early morning writing.
Well, that's really impressive and amazing that you were able to do that, and put the time into it. And I think that's great advice for people to find the routine that works for them. And this podcast is all about vocal leadership. And that was why I wanted to invite you on, David, because I've been following you for a while on LinkedIn and saw a lot of your amazing content over the years. You just mentioned you do your blog post yourself, you have your website, your books, you're very active. How would you describe the role, in your opinion, changing of executives and using their public voice over the years? How has that evolved? Do you think it's crucial for leaders to be engaged online? And do you have any advice for other CEOs who may not be active yet or not vocal online yet for how they can get started?
Sure. Maybe to your first question, I do think it's evolved quite a bit in the role of executive leadership. When I started 30 years ago, or wheel back the clock even before my journey, a lot of executive presence at the corporate world was about driving shareholder value, market share. It was all about performance. And there's still that in essence of running a business. Obviously, you got to perform. But I think the dynamics of a corporate executive now, or the modern day executive, you really have to think of what I think are like the fundamental pillars of a good functioning society or country. So you think not only about work, the business you're in, but it's what's going on in the home and what's going on in the community. Those three are interwoven in, I think, an executive's leadership journey. You have to think about the dynamics of people in their home life that bleed into work. So the right kind of corporate policies to support a variety of different, home life. You got to be thinking about that. Not to mention your work environment, how you do that, but also the community you operate in. Are you treating suppliers right? Are you involved in the community? You're doing those kind of advocacy things. I think that's at least in my 30-year journey, I've seen a fundamental shift from what was the corporate titan to now that leader that has to think about those three fundamental pillars of their team that's living, and speak about it or write about it or voice about it. Some of these, Kimberly, are complicated issues in our evolving world today, but I think you got to have a voice that's supportive of that homework and community in today's world. I think to be the kind of executive that's demanded. And then your other question on kind of hey, some advice, I think, how to get started. I think not everybody's bold enough to put their points of view out. It takes a little bit of time. Just I think just realizing that we all got to get a little comfortable doing that. But I think my mom used to say, just like that old Thumper, I think it was Bambi, that one, like, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. So I think online is probably passing along a little encouragement to folks like yourself or me or others who are posting things that are in line with how you truly feel. Spread a little bit of encouragement that way. I think that's a good way to get started. That's certainly the way I still do a lot of that. I see somebody putting out good work, pass a little pat on the back. Everybody needs it, because you probably see it. Most of us are either kind of not getting a lot of response. Nobody's got these million followers. Only a few people do. And so it's nice to give a little encouragement from time to time. Sorry if I rambled a little bit on that, Kimberly, but it was a big question.
Oh, not at all. I think those were great insights. And I think you raised an amazing point, which is to interact with your community, which you're really good at. And, when someone does start being more vocal, I think that is a key in it, not just posting that person's own content, but interacting, giving kudos or commenting, liking when they see something they agree with. It's a great way also for their content to get more likes and to grow their community. So I think you raised a really amazing point there. And what were some of the best things that have happened from you writing your books and being more vocal online?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. You end up making a lot more friends. The nice thing about it is online, certainly your reach can be pretty broad. It wasn't like growing up where you just kind of had your community, so your real physical community, and so I think it's given me a chance to experience other people's views, make good connections, both business and personal wise. So I think it's been a really good experience for me where one, you get a chance to know some people, but also what's been touching, and I think I find purpose in when somebody shares that something I wrote, whether it was in a book or a blog post, was helpful to them. I've kind of put out some conversation games over the years in addition to books that help leaders and parents talk to kids more. And so those kind of meaningful connections that are made online or through resources I've created is it's kind of a really neat thing and keeps me going.
That's amazing. And in addition to your professional work, you're involved in a lot of charitable activities. Could you tell us more about your philanthropic efforts and how they align with your values and mission?
Sure, we've my wife and I have started Harvest Time Partners, the business and the foundation we started a while back, and it's designed to try to provide character building opportunities to children and young adults. And a lot of the resources that we've developed and have on that website have been anchored towards helping people develop their character, because the principle or the intent around that is really that we think if people can guide their thoughts, decisions, and actions by universal principles like trust and honesty and compassion and service, uh, we probably end up having better thoughts and bringing about better outcomes. And so that's where a lot of our efforts have been. A lot of the resources that we've created, whether it's books or games, are designed to just remind people that even as our world gets more complicated, those universally accepted principles of compassion and teamwork are probably good ways to navigate a complicated world as opposed to overcomplicating it with maybe too many solutions.
Very well said. And to wrap up, a personal question. We saw that you have a family of six. I can imagine balancing a demanding work schedule with your family must be a challenge. What strategies or practices have you found most effective in maintaining a healthy work and a healthy life outside of work balance?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Well, certainly in 30 years, and we also were foster parents for a little bit in addition to those four kids, and they're out of the house now, which is a whole nother adjustment. But I think some of those common principles that we talked about, it's teamwork, it's realizing as a purpose we're trying to build a family collectively, and I think those are really important ones. I know one that my kids would snicker at, but very similar, is that family meeting, just like a business meeting where you got to make sure where everybody's going, where are we headed, what are we doing. So we used to find at least a quiet moment, usually on a Sunday, to have just a little family meeting to kind of figure out, one is logistically who's going where and what do we got, all the normal logistics things, but also like, hey, what are we trying to kind of be and become. And although sometimes, especially smart aleck teenagers may come kicking and screaming to those kind of meetings, but at times, I think looking back, it's just helpful to remind people we're in this together, and let's get after it together and help each other out.
Well, thank you so much, David, for being here today, sharing your insights. I learned so much myself about everything you said, how business, military, family life seem to have a lot of principles in common. So there's something from today's episode I think everyone can take. So thank you again, and until next time.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Enjoyed the talk.